Hello, welcome to the Winners Find a Way show. I am your host, Trent Clark, and I am the CEO of Leadershipity. I am a serial entrepreneur organization member, as well as my guest today, Gail Davis, which I'm super excited about her joining us. I am also a speaker and author of Leading Winning Teams. Most people know me, though, because I spent over 12 years in professional baseball, coaching in 3 World Series. And Gail Davis, welcome to the Winners Find a Way show. How are you doing?
I am doing great. I've really been looking forward to this trip.
Yeah, me too. I am so excited to have you. We are industry peers because I am in the industry, not doing anything nearly as important as you are, and just trying to make my way. And folks in my seat need folks in your seat because we are not skilled at getting operations, management, marketing, the whole thing that GDA speakers and does. And now in their 25th year of doing this right. And wow, I mean, it's such a tribute, Gail, to your longevity in this game. And how did you get started in GDA speakers?
My favorite story, so thank you for asking. I had a long career with a corporation, and the end of my career, I focused on large scale corporate events. And one year, the chairman of the company asked me who our keynote speaker was going to be the following year. And I said, "Well, I haven't started working on it yet. We're going to Hawaii. Why do you ask?" And as the CEO of a Fortune 500 company, he said, "I'm tired of the same old, same old. At the end of the year, I will hear, this person several times. And I want someone that's new and different, someone everyone would like to hear, and someone no one has heard, and someone that's very global in their appeal." And so I was unrelated watching the movie Alive about the plane crash in the Andes Mountains. And the person I was watching it with said, "What about that guy for your speaker?" And I was like, "Ethan Hawke?" And he was like, "No, the real guy."
Yeah.
And now we talked earlier about how I could avoid certain dates that would give away my age, but I'm just going to tell you this was in 1994 and there was no Google. So when I went to look for this guy, I had no choice but to call Washington Speakers Bureau and call, different places to say, "Hey, do you know this guy, Nando Parado?" No one had heard of him. And they actually cautioned me, like, if he's not out there and he's not on the circuit, just because a movie was made about him doesn't make him a good speaker. Bottom line, I tracked him down through the U.S. Embassy, no, the Uruguayan Embassy in D.C. And he ended up speaking for an EDS event, and it was off the charts. And I typically am somewhat risk averse, but I was so into him and his story that I quit my long-term career and started GDA speakers with one speaker.
Wow. So first of all, this is a really interesting story for our show because Gail Davis and I met about 8 years ago. I was an entrepreneur organization member in Chicago. Gail's also in EO. And we were hosting a big event of new prospects. We had coupled, I think, with I think the Jesuit school
I
downtown.
think that's right.
Right?
Yes, yes.
And I was super excited about this event. And having seen the movie, it's just an overcomer story, right? Like Nando's story is incredible. And so I was just super excited about seeing the event. I had brought like 5 guests to the event. And then, of course, you came along and introduced the speaker, told us all a little bit about your business, how Nando and you met, and what a great talk it was. I mean, transformative. Probably and by the way, I still talk about it today. As a
Mhm.
professional speaker, I talk about Nando's opener like almost probably once a month. I mean, it's amazing. And I'm like, if you haven't seen the guy, like you really need to see the guy. Now I'll be able to go, hey, listen, you really just need to talk to Gail. Gail will get
That's
a
right.
separate, like, and so I don't know why I didn't think about that before, but I could have been giving you all sorts of business.
Yeah.
But it is a once in a lifetime experience listening to him. He tells the tale better than anybody else. It's a faith journey, and it's a powerful story of humanity. And I wrote the book, right? Leading Winning Teams. And his point of making that we were a team. That was a bigger difference than, a bunch of people on a commercial airline wreck and we're like, "Oh, hey, we're all gonna get along, right?" Like now all of a sudden it's like division all over the place. He's a team captain. There's a bunch of things that, we go into team mode. And
Yeah. And the truth is the leaders kept dying
yeah,
because actually their official team captain died.
yeah,
And then some of the medical students would assume this role of leadership. And Nando will tell you he was the least likely. If you said, of all these people that are on this plane, who's going to emerge as the leader? He was least likely, but he wanted to get out of there.
yeah.
And he was very
And
logical.
yeah, and I won't tell the end of his story, but he was very motivated to get out of
He
there,
was
and
very
like for a lot
motivated.
of
Yeah.
reasons.
Yeah.
And everybody was. I mean,
Yeah.
clearly, unbelievable story. If you've not seen Alive, Ethan Hawke's fabulous in the movie. Yeah, I think by the way, no knock on Ethan. I'm sure he's a great actor, everything else, but Nando Pareto is a better speaker for this event. I will tell you right now. And so it is authentic as it gets. I mean,
Yes.
it is amazing. Now, you're an Oklahoma girl, grew up
That's
there.
right.
You're a Sooner.
I'm
Go
a Sooner,
Sooners.
boomer, Sooner, all the
Yes.
way.
I don't know if you can say that too loud in Texas. You were sitting in Dallas. I mean, shadow of the Cotton Bowl. I mean, you got to be careful around there, Gail.
I do. And one of my key leaders who runs our sales and events department, she's a Longhorn.
Oh, really?
But
And you hired her?
yeah,
Like,
I
really?
did. What does that say about me? I don't
It
know,
says,
but
it says you're a
she's
humble
really
leader.
good.
Yeah, it says you're a humble, inclusive leader. Like that's what it says. Um, have two grown up boys, have grandkids now. They're all
Ew.
close to you, which is really cool. I want to, what's interesting is what most people don't know about you is you cracked the code coming out of college, writing obituaries and learning how to do some dark film in the dark room, like how to process. How would a student from Oklahoma, Altus, Oklahoma, get into that?
Well, funny you should ask. And I know how you know because I think LinkedIn requires you to have 3 jobs. And my only professional jobs have been EDS and GDA. So I had to go back to my internship at the Altus Times Democrat. But what a great job. I'm a journalism major and I use my journalism skills every day. The fundamentals of journalism are to understand who, what, when, where, and why. And when you're
Yeah.
talking to a client or an employee and you understand who, what, when, where, and why, or you're being a business leader and making a decision, I mean, that's really great. But what was so cool about being an intern at this small newspaper, which I think I did a couple of years, whoever was on vacation, I was that person. So, oh, the sports writer's going to be gone next week, Gail. You need to cover all the baseball games, but you would love that. Oh, and then there's the summer I kept score at the baseball game, and I thought any out was a K. I
Yeah.
didn't know that was, yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and so some of my write-ups about baseball games probably could be an SNL skit for sure. But I also, had to write the obituaries. And here's a fact you may not know. What is the most commonly misspelled word in the English language?
I would say obituary.
Cemetery.
Oh,
It,
really?
yeah, it has 3 E's, and most people want to put an A at the end.
I would have too. I
Yeah,
would have
these are
immediately
the
said
things.
Cemetary
Yep,
without a doubt.
and you'll never do it again. 3 E's. You'll never do it again. So, and you
Well, I don't want to talk about being anywhere near one. That's right. So, I don't even talk about cemeteries, let alone spell it, Gail. So,
You're
yeah,
right, you're right.
yeah,
Anyway, that's the story, and back then, they didn't have digital photography. You had a camera, it had film in it, and I learned how to go into the dark room, and it's dark, and you get these reels, and you take your film out of that case, and you roll it on this reel, and you push it in solutions, and I don't even know how I did it now that I think back on it, but you actually would develop, I think that's the word, you would develop your film.
yeah. That's so
Crazy.
cool. Yeah, probably not today's skill that you need, but I tell a lot of people, you talk about journalism, and I tell a lot of people my most important and valuable class in high school was typing because
Yes.
I mean, today, keyboarding, I mean, come on. I watched, in professional sports, I watched our medical personnel from time to time hunt and peck. And I'm
Oh,
like,
I know.
oh my gosh, like you've got to do 19 medical reports today. And
Yeah.
And I'm like, "Oh my goodness, I will freak out, man." Like, I'm like, do you want me to just type them up for you? Because
Yeah,
I could
yeah.
save you like
I can
2 hours
type
of your
and
life.
talk. I don't even have to
Yeah,
look. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, it's that became, and probably the computer generation that we grew up in as it transitioned into that. Of course, typing was everything back in the day. I mean, it wasn't a keyboarding class; it was typing. Like
Typing.
it was typing.
Yeah.
The whole like the whole thing, right? Like, yeah, that's dating me right there. By the way, thank
That's
you,
right.
Gail. I appreciate you could reference that. I appreciate that. So now GDA, you start with Nando. Great start, by the way, and you progress. Before we get into the deal your business, like I can only imagine 2020 because I felt this. As a speaker, I think I've spoken 17 countries. So I mean, all of a sudden, I have a lucrative side business. My coaching is my main business, but
Mhm.
I get a lot of clients into our firm because I go out and I speak about leading winning teams and elite performance and production and how do you 10x your brand. And so we talk about these companies and how we put systems in place. And good teams have good systems. And I get a lot of clients. And then 2020 hits and I'm like, "Oh my goodness. No, no, no extra speaking work. That's more than half my marketing, right? That's more than half
Mhm.
it doesn't matter where I spend money on marketing, speaking still outperforms it. And I'm like, oh my goodness, I lose half my clients that are Canadian based with a border that's closed. And
Wow.
I am absolutely sucking wind. Before I wrote any book, I went to my good friend Gail Davis and said, Gail, I am not getting work anymore. I need representation. And God bless you. You were like, Trent, awesome. I think you're good and everything. I've got a client base that's sucking wind, and I'm staying with the folks that got me here. And I have got my stable of ponies, and they're fabulous. And I love my barn. And I just don't have the bandwidth to add somebody. And I just so respected your candor, your willingness to even hear me out, right? Like, you're really not GDA quality, Trent, which I really
No,
appreciate you
no,
didn't
no,
tell me
no,
that.
no, 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 no.
Yeah, yeah. So it was really refreshing in a time that didn't feel refreshing at all. Like there was
Yes.
a lot of people blowing a lot of sunshine and smoke, and I just really appreciated and honored that you gave it to me straight, and I always value that in our relationship. So thank
Thank
you,
you.
Gail.
I appreciate you. Yeah, that was a dark, dark time. I remember it was a leap year, and on February 29th, I went to an Eagles concert, jam-packed, American Airlines Arena,
Yeah.
everybody's singing, spitting all over each other.
Yeah.
And the next day, I stopped by my mom's house in Oklahoma because I was gonna go help my sister with something for a week. And I remember saying, "Oh, man, this business is right where I need it to be. It's on autopilot. I've got the best team. It's so wonderful to know that I can just come up here and spend time with family, and I don't need to worry about anything."
Yeah.
And on Wednesday, one of my key employees called and said, "Such and such celebrity is canceling because of the coronavirus." That's what we called it initially.
Yeah.
And I'm like, "What in the heck is the coronavirus?" And she goes, "I
Right.
don't know. I'm Googling it, but she's from California and she's just worried about it." And I was like, okay. And then the next morning, there were two other people that were going to cancel, and they weren't celebrities and they weren't from California. And I think by Friday we had six. And
Oh,
I thought that was the end of the world.
yeah.
And I leave Oklahoma. I must return to the mothership because it's all falling apart. And then it ensued. But and the end of the story is 245 events that were impacted.
Yeah.
And those were such tough conversations sometimes. I did learn the power of relationships. If I had a strong Not I. If GDA speakers had a strong relationship with the client, it was a much easier conversation to have. And if we had a history with the speaker, it was an easier conversation to have. The reason I was so loyal to the speakers is, they were like, "Don't worry about paying me anything. If you owe me for something, you're getting ready to pay me for something that just happened in February, hold it, hang on to it. I want to do everything I can to support you to get us
Mm.
both to the other side. And I had one super high profile guy say, "The next time you book me, the entire fee goes to you because, you know, we get the smaller percentage." And he knew
Yeah.
that. And I had
Yeah.
booked him for all these years. And he's like, "It's your turn now." So the relationships made the conversations easy. But when you had a first time client or a speaker who was working with you for the first time, the trust wasn't there, the relationship wasn't there, and it was just a beat down. And I, I mean, it was hard. It was so hard.
Mm.
And EO was instrumental during that time. I don't know what I would have done without EO. I'm a poster child for that PPP money, I think is what it was called.
Yeah.
I'm not sure I would have known, like, "Hey, this exists and you need to get on it, and here's how you fill it out." But because I was in so many EO groups, I was one of the first people to get that money, which allowed me to really stay afloat. And also, my industry had a lot of support groups where we helped each other and we together learned virtual. Because I can honestly tell you that, I mean, how can I not do the math a little bit faster than this? But however long I had been in business at that time, so 20 years, we'd never done a virtual event in our lives. I
Yeah.
didn't know what StreamYard was, or for that matter, I don't think I'd ever done a Zoom call.
Yeah.
And I certainly didn't know what Teams was. And I remember telling my team, "I don't know what's going to happen, but I got a feeling this is going to be with us for a while. So if you get invited to anything that's online, I don't care what the topic is, go observe it. How does it work? We have got to learn this." And it's really amazing. I think it started in by about May, maybe early May. We were in the business of doing virtual speeches, and we had to go in and figure out which speakers did virtual because not every speaker did, and what was their virtual fee compared to their regular fee. And for a year, that's all we did. I'm sure that's all we did for a year because it kept new variants kept coming up, right?
Yep.
It's like a
It's amazing
nightmare.
looking back on that. Like, it's first of all, winners find a way, Gail, right? Like, that
Yeah,
is a great story of this is what we're going to have to do. And I remember I remember giving an event talk and, I was so early to Zoom. I remember forgetting to record it. Like, it was like, I would do stuff and I would like, "Oh my gosh." I would start recording halfway through because I forgot to press record. Like, I had 0 knowledge how to do it. Now and EO was formidable, right? I went to my northern Michigan property, which is kind of middle of nowhere, right?
right.
And gorgeous up there, beautiful, solace. I mean, all the things to really think about what's important. And that was a fabulous thing for me during COVID as I'm watching my business, implode, right? And meanwhile, I got to get to work. And so I'm doing my Zoom, doing this Zoom tutorials. I'm doing all these things, taking like a quarter of the fee now to do what I was doing
Mhm.
before with twice the prep, right? And I'm like,
Right.
"Oh my gosh, like this is." And I told a lot of people like I'm working harder than I've ever worked and making like a quarter of what I've ever
Yeah.
made.
Yeah.
So like, what am I into here, right? So it was such an interesting time, but that's what you have to do, and people weren't really ready to accept. And now I think about our EO network and they became formidable to me. I got back into my local chapter after that, realized I needed my monthly forum,
Yep.
so important, and got back there. And now you think about how many fabulous speakers have we had in EO that have come on virtually to our 18,000 members worldwide on a global speak. And
Mhm.
who haven't we had, right? Sir Richard Branson, and we've had the who's
Brene
who.
Brown.
Yeah, like, yeah,
Yeah.
it just keeps going, right? And you're like going, man, to get these learnings on your big
Yes.
screen at your office, in your home, and with
Yeah.
a group of 30 members, whatever you're doing together, the learning is the learning, and it's been good. Let's talk a little bit about where really GDA has grown and stepped up. I mean, in the beginning, one of the superpowers of Gail Davis was, and it's funny that we're talking about this because your father's frustration with math, but yet you're a money girl. Like, you really knew the numbers. You
Uh-huh.
really like the numbers, you understood the numbers, you wanted visibility on the numbers, and that has always been a GDA superpower. And this is a really important part of our business because we get paid. People have, I don't know how many thousands of dollars I have in the bank right now for they're holding my date in a year from
Right.
now, right?
Right.
These are deposits on dates, right? And
Deposits.
so that's all they are is deposits. Start spending that cash and watch out, right? Uh,
Yeah.
Yeah, and so you've been very stringent and forthright and disciplined in that finance and your spending plan, knowing this is what we will do in a revenue. We need to
Mhm.
make $1 million, whatever it is, whatever the number. And so we've got 10 coming, we've got 9 to spend, and that's it. Like this is
Yep.
going to be our spending plan. And it's not like, oh, well, can we spend 11? No, like because we have
No.
no guarantee that revenue is coming and we can plot for this revenue, but not anymore. And if we make
Right.
11, hey, all the bonuses, right? But
That's right. That's right.
otherwise, no. And you've been tell me where that came from and why you understood that so early.
Hmm. I think, you mentioned my
Ross
father.
Perot gave you that. Ross
Yeah.
Perot said, "Listen, you don't spend a single dollar at EDS."
Well, yes. Okay, so I guess through osmosis, I've been influenced by military
Yeah,
rigor. So my
yeah,
dad was a Marine.
yep.
And Perot built his entire senior leadership. He was a graduate of the Naval Academy, and every top leader was from the Army, the Marines. So there was a lot of discipline. Growing up as a child, we didn't spend money we didn't have. I mean, period. End of subject. We we lived within our means. That's just what we did. And I always had a job. I mean, I babysit. I think I told you I kept score at baseball games. I always worked, and I had to manage that money when it ran out. Happening there when I got to EDS, they were very much that way. Spend the money like it was your own. We budgeted, we forecast, we outlooked. We had to explain if we went over once. You didn't go over twice. So I think I've just always had a really healthy appreciation, and particularly in this business, from the beginning, I had the mindset if people give me a deposit for Trent, and then Trent gets an inner ear infection and he can't fly, and I can't find a replacement, then that money has to go back to them. So I have always had what I would call an escrow type account where every deposit goes there. So it's a big balance. It's beautiful. But in my mind, it is not my money. It just sits over there. I don't even pay any attention to it. And then on the play date, the money from that escrow account comes over to the operating account and you get paid and we get paid. And I've just
Mhm.
always done it that way.
Yep. And it's just, I mean, it seems simple accounting, right? It does
Yeah.
seem, very simple. And, we have a mutual friend in EO, Greg Crabtree, right? Simple numbers, right? Like,
Yeah.
let's not try to convolute it. And it's
Right.
really important. But let's talk more recency now. You've been at the business 20 years. You run into COVID or kind of around that 2021st year. And coming out of that, you engage with a coach, you get an operating system. Things change with your process. You change how you do your measurement, your
Mhm.
your improvements, your KPIs. What do you learn by implementing key operating metrics?
The value of transparency with the team. So when you have any kind of a KPI sheet, a scorecard, whatever you want to call it, and you with consistency update it and everybody can see it, it's it's right there.
Yep.
There's no secrets. And so the confidence in the leadership is great because it's all right there. And it started to become the key predictors. So in our world, obviously we care about how many gigs are closed. Well, one of the key leading indicators is how many of your proposals are viewed. So I started to track that and I'm like, people who make their goal have 25 proposals viewed a week. And so someone can be really on a roll, 20 25, 32, 27, and things are going good and they have these great months. But as they start getting really busy closing those deals because you're in the midst of the contracts, you'll start to see maybe a little drop. Like not as many proposals are going out. Oh, you only got 14 views this week. And they're like, I know that's so busy on contracts. And I go, but you have to balance that because if you jump over here and you're all in the contract thing, you're going to wake up and you didn't have the views and now the sales are down. So it's become fun for me to monitor that and not get on to people because they're down, but to encourage them and help them see, oh, it's so tempting to let that go, but there's a balance. So I've enjoyed that.
Yeah, I think it's, when I think about a good operating system, it brings great and open communication, and what gets measured gets managed, right? So we're back to
Hmm.
execution of what's really important. And then I love the way you said that, as you prioritize and simplify the way that we become successful because you've identified that process. It's now very
Hmm.
easily not to reprimand, but come alongside like, hey, how can I help you get these 25
Right.
views? How can I help you get and balance this time? Because you're going to need all these things. You're responsible for all five of these aspects of your role, not like, well, I'm really killing number one and two of my role, and I've kind of neglected three, four, and five, Gail. And you're like, wait a minute, like you're kind of responsible for all the role. Like you can't just do the parts you
All of
like.
them. Yeah.
Yeah, all of it. And so I find that's really good. And what a great way to grow and give confidence when there's clarity around what people are doing. And then they see, wow, I can really deliver what we need
Hmm.
here at GDA. I'm confident. I don't know how many times I've sat in a job and thought at the beginning of that job, like, wow, I mean, I could never do what Gail does. I mean, Gail does this and Gail does that. It's amazing. And then, but I sit in a year, 18 months, 24 months of watching Gail do the job and learning from her directly. And I think, like, wow, you know what? Maybe I could talk to this speaker and get this right and close this deal. And maybe I should take a shot at that now because you gain confidence in it, right? And there's so much value because you're getting these little victories along the way. I think that's so huge. And so sounds I mean relatively game changing for GDA.
100%. And I think I don't know that I've always been that leader that was encouraging. I think I was telling you personally that I had a really big transformation last year
Yeah.
where, I mean, I'd worked with a business coach for a long time and I think I was always like kind of looking for my exit plan. That's a big thing in EO, what's your exit strategy?
Yeah.
And, I even went through a drill at one point. I don't even know if I should say this out loud, but I am, where I had my company evaluation done. And trust you, when they look at 5 years running, you don't really want to go with the company valuation that includes 2020 and 2021.
Right.
So at that time, one of my sons said, Mother, what in the world are you going to do if you don't have GDA? And I'm like, Well, what do you mean? He goes, You love it. You love going to the events. You love your relationships with your speakers. Like it's fun for you. Hire people to do the stuff you don't love, but there's really no reason for you to stop doing it. I was like, you know what? He's really right. But I realized, so then I was like, what was the thing? Why was I trying to go away? And I used once with my business coach the word frustration. And she was like, you use that word a lot. Why do you think that is? And it took me to a thing that happened with my mom like 3 days before where she had been in my office and she had overheard me talking to an employee. And as we left, she said, "You remind me a lot of your dad." And I was like, "Oh, okay." And she said, "He used to get so frustrated." They had their own business, they were
Yeah.
entrepreneurs. And she said, "He used to get so frustrated with people because he would think things were so simple. He would think that he had been so clear. He would think that everybody knew his expectations. But when they didn't, he just got frustrated with it."
Yep.
And, oh, it was so hard to hear. It was so hard to hear. And I knew she was right. And so when the business coach 1 week later said, "Where do you think that comes from?" I said, "I know exactly where it comes from." And so this may feel woo woo, it may feel kind of religious, but she said to me, "You have got to let that go." She goes, "I don't know if that means my father was deceased at the time. If you write your father a letter, I don't know if you say a prayer. I don't know what is, but you got to acknowledge that that's where you learned that and that's not who you want to be. And so that happened. I was actually in Oklahoma with my mom. She goes, "Hey, let's go by the cemetery and see your dad." And we were in separate cars. And I thought, well, this is good a time as any. And I remember I'm just driving through and I'm like, man, you were a great provider. You encouraged me. My dad was more proud of me than any father has ever been proud of a daughter. And he believed I could do anything. So he had a gazillion attributes. He instilled in me tons of self confidence, the
Yeah.
monetary discipline. But he did get super frustrated when people didn't understand what he was trying to say. And I said, I realize that now. And I have emulated that. And starting today, I'm not going to do that anymore. And it's really not that simple, but it really is that simple. And I talked to one of my key leaders and I said, if you see me demonstrating that behavior, call me out because really it's an opportunity that I know something that I have not explained clearly. And I shifted my entire mindset and I'd see something that maybe previously would annoy me, bug me, frustrate me. And I'd think, here's an opportunity for training. And what happened is one time I was going to document the steps for doing something that I thought was so intuitive and so easy. Holy cow, Trent. There were more steps in that process than I even imagined. So
Yeah.
now I developed an appreciation that some things are intuitive to me at almost 25 years.
Yeah.
But if you're new on this team, you're not going to figure it out. Somebody has got to walk you through it. So I'm telling you, I'm loving work now and I'm loving leaning into the team. And I can honestly say that emotion of frustration occasionally, shows up. But this has been a transformation that's allowed me to go, hey, there's really no reason to be frustrated. There's an opportunity here. And that was big.
Yeah. First of all, thank you for the story. I mean, first of all, I'm like dodging apples falling from the tree here because I'm like going, oh my gosh, this is totally me. Like I think fast. I'm like, everyone needs to keep up, right? Because I'm going to go fast.
Hmm.
And that's always not the way of everybody else, right?
Right.
And oh, by the way, I think I'm totally clear on my directions and
Yeah.
my family regularly lets me know that I'm not, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I'm like, "Ooh, that's not really what I'm going for," right? So I don't love that attribute about myself. And so I really appreciate it. I wonder if your dad ever recognized that in himself, that he didn't love that about himself, that he'd lose patience with people.
Yeah.
But I assume that you're his first daughter. Is that fair?
I am oldest daughter.
So the first daughter becomes her dad, right? Like they emulate all the activity.
Apparently.
My daughter is you will know she's her father's step. You will know it by if we're together, like, watch out,
Yeah.
right? And she probably doesn't love that. Like, I think, and I hope, and yeah, what I really appreciated was that mentality of abundance, of all the gratitude, of the great things that your father
Absolutely.
certainly gave you. And hey, this isn't so great. And I wish this were different. And I'm going to do something about it, which I really love taking action. Everybody out there taking action to do something about it is a big deal. And so you did that, and that's very admirable. But I really admire the honor of all the great things and not the focus on, there was this one bad thing and I'll never get over it. You're like, really? Like,
Yeah.
because you live in a great house. You had a pretty good life. Like, you're looking at all the negative, right? You're like going, whoa, wait a minute. So I really appreciate that. The other thing that I talk to a lot of clients about is we all have attributes. I don't know if you've ever seen the leadershipity pyramid, but we have like 4 tiers, kind of built on kind of like Wooden's pyramid of success, right? And it's all
Hmm.
about those 80s of leadership, right? And it's foundational that we really want to get that right when we have like the cornerstones of honest, of integrity and humility, which are
Hmm.
so important,
Hmm.
right? But then we have these three other attributes that we have, which is spirituality, right? Which is so
Hmm.
important, quality and stability as leaders. Like if we can get those five really right, like here goes Gail Davis, who's always had those five right, by the way. And now Gail's building her high rise on that foundation because those five can hold a lot. right? But you start building, oh, I want to do a 6 story, and like, oh, well, we really don't have quality, and we really don't have integrity. Like, this thing's probably collapsing about the
Yep.
third floor, right? Like, we're
100%. Yep.
not building on this because we're gonna keep having to go back and rebuild and go, oh, why does this thing keep faltering, right? And even one, you know, causes an issue. And so I think it's such a big deal. And so as you get this right, not everybody's going to have all the attributes right. So now the self-awareness comes in. This is who I am. I'm aware. And
Mhm.
now the power of giving people permission to let them know this is who I am. And this isn't something I do great. It's not something I'm
Yeah.
very proud of, and it's something I want to do differently. And I'm giving you permission. And you know, where I use this a lot are people that are very short with people, right? They have very low
Mhm.
patience, or they're blurters, you know, the kind of people who kind of blurt, you know, like not a lot of filter, right? I love when people come in because when people are straightforward and honest, no filter, your CD on the disc kind of types,
Yeah.
right? You know, they are half the charge is that it catches you by surprise
Right.
because they're brutally honest, and you're like, could have take out the brutal part, you know, like, and when someone, and so the natural attribute for most people is when they first hear it, get defensive.
Yeah.
And so if someone said, "Hey, listen, I've been charged with being brutally honest with people and to a fault. I want to be very straightforward. I have no problem with straightforward feedback. I don't take it personally. I want the data, I want the information. Therefore, I think everybody else wants it too. So I give it to people straight, no BS. And if I say something to offend you, that is not my intent. My
Yes.
intent is I want to give you my best, and I want to help you, and I want to give it to you straightforward so that you don't have any mix on clarity of what we're trying to say, and I'm going to give it to you straight. It's not to offend. But if I do, you have permission to let me know I offended you because it's not my intent, and I want you to let me know. Well, the next time that happens, immediately, Gail, you don't get defensive because you're like, oh, yeah, I guess that's that brutal part, right, Trent? And you're like, and we're laughing about it now, going, oh, was that harsh? Was that like, did
Yeah,
that come
yeah,
off?
yeah,
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 I don't like your hair at all. You need to change it because it needs
yeah.
to be more professional. Like, what? Like, hold on, man. Like, and like, probably not a hairdresser. So
Yeah.
like, not qualified, right? So like, so now we're laughing at because I'm not defensive now because you said you would do it, and so when you did it, I'm not surprised. So
Right.
we just took that element out of it, and now it's like, oh yeah, I didn't really mean that. Like, yeah, that's not right. It's not for me to say. I don't know anything about it, so I don't know why I'm
Yeah,
saying it. Thank
yeah,
you for catching me on my BS
yeah,
because
yeah, yeah.
that's not good, and I didn't mean it. And please don't be, offended by that because I'm just, blah blah blah. And so I think that is a game changer for leadership teams. That is a game changer for team health, right? Like that we can all talk about that and be aware, hey, we're not great at everything, and I'm gonna mess up.
Yeah, I love it. It
Yeah.
has been
That's
a game changer.
yeah. I really think that's really cool. I also like the experience of letting it go. I think
Mhm.
that's really, really great. Let's kind of pivot here a little bit
Okay.
to, one of those areas in your business that you'd really like to shore up. Everyone wants to get better, and we have these areas. And as you build your operating system, you start recognizing like, hey, I've got to not only get feedback from my people, which we do really good. I want to get feedback from clients too. And you have a KPI. One of your KPIs is how many times do people book with GDA? And you've got people in the hundreds of, oh, we need
Mhm,
somebody. GDA, speed dial one, right? GDA, right? And you've got a lot of those clients, right?
mhm.
And that's awesome. But after reviewing those numbers, you see like we have a lot that don't have us on speed dial, might not ever find our number again, and apparently have lost it, right? And you're like
Right.
thinking, what the heck are we doing here? And so what do you do about it? Tell me about that process, what you learned and what you're doing about it.
Well, first, it's shocking to look at because Karis, my director of sales and operations, generated this report, which you would think I would have thought of along the way, but I didn't. And it
Still
was
learning. I love that
it
about you.
yeah.
Still learning. Come on.
descending order our clients. So here's so and so 110 bookings, so and so 103. And this is looking good. I mean, she's got it on the big screen and we're scrolling down. I'm feeling good. 80, 75, 60. I'm feeling good about 40. I'm feeling good about 25. I'm feeling good.
Yeah.
And then we get down to the single digits. I'm still kind of okay with 9 and 8. But when she got to the 2s and the 1s, and I don't even ask me how many there were because I think I got sick before I let her keep scrolling.
Yeah, yeah,
And
and you're sure that you see pages going by, and you're
yeah,
like,
I'm
you've
like,
had a lot of clients. In fairness, Gail, right? You've had a
yes,
lot of clients, so I
yeah,
want to like preface this that this is 25 years of
years of
clients. Like,
clients.
there's a lot, right?
But let me tell you what I'm doing. We're starting at the top, and she went through and color coded. Are we actively engaged with this client? Yes, yes, yes. Whoop, found one. Maybe it's even in the 40s. I
Yeah.
don't care what the number is. If we're not actively engaged, Gail Davis herself is calling whoever I can find at that company, and I am saying, I'm calling you. We are celebrating our 25th anniversary. We never would have gotten here without clients. And first of all, I want to personally thank you for the one booking, the two bookings, the 32 bookings that you gave us.
Yep.
And if there is something that we can do to re engage, it was never my intention for our partnership to lose its connection. And we're here and we'd like to do that. My team's better than ever. But most importantly, thank you for working with us to get us to this point of 25. And let me tell you, it's working pretty good.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
People really appreciate that. And
Yeah.
it's very sincere. I mean,
Yeah.
I know that I wouldn't be, the stats, from EO, most companies don't make it 3 years. Most women owned companies really don't.
Yeah.
And to make it 25 years and through a global pandemic, we did a lot right. But, I'm just wired. And I know I get this from my dad. If all those things are right, what's wrong and how do we fix that?
Yeah.
And I have to
Well,
watch that about myself because that can be so demotivating to the team. I have to watch
mm.
that, looking at what's wrong and how we improve it. You know what I
Yeah. Well,
mean,
I
Trent?
I think continuous improvement is always in season, right? And
Continuous
I
improvement.
yeah,
Okay.
I think that Nick Saban is so good at this, the famed football coach
Yo,
here
I know.
over
Yes, yes,
over at
yes, yes.
Alabama. He's had a great program, but like he doesn't rest on like, we'll just do exactly what we did last year and we'll get the same result. And we'll do exactly what we did last year because we've always been in the top 3 in the country, right? And like, no, no, no. No, like he is looking for gaps in the system. Like, what have we not shored up? What's changed in the market? What is different now than it was then? And I just think that's admirable. It's quality. And we're really good about this in sports, right, Gail? We're good at going back and reviewing the tapes. What went right? What went
Yes,
good?
yes.
And why wouldn't we be doing that in business? Like, why? And all you're doing simply is reviewing the tapes. Like,
Oh, I love
why did
that.
they call us? Why did they want to? Why did they call us in the first place? What? How did they find out about us? Why haven't they heard us about us in the last 3 years? What could we have done to get those calls? Who are you using now, and what could we do to earn you back? Like, and why did you go with them? And that's great. I mean, this is what the great thing about competition is. People do it, and you
Mhm,
learn. You learn from your competition, and it's good, and they push you to be better. And I think in the absence of competition, I think people would rest on their laurels, right? We'd be like, oh
right.
yeah, hey, listen, we can just show up, like,
Yeah.
and we're probably gonna win, right? And that's a dangerous place,
Yeah.
extremely dangerous. Gail, tell me about, you talk about 25 years, woman-owned business. Like that is no joke, like huge deal. And by the way, quick review of our 25 years, terrorist attack in our country,
Yeah.
a war, multiple political upheaval, now we have pandemic, and now, I think we're somewhat, as a journalist, I think you can appreciate, we're somewhat near a media crisis where we can't really gather information the way we used to gather information. And that's becoming a challenge. And so, wow, like many, many hills to climb, right? Climbed
Mhm.
them all, but there's valleys in those hills, right? And if someone's out there and and you and I both know it's not easy out there right now. And if someone's in one of those valleys, you've been there before,
Mm.
what would you tell them? What would you tell them today, Gail, and what maybe has been positive for you to get back moving in the right direction?
I think, You have hit on exactly why this industry is such a perfect fit for me, because there are so many experts out there that address the various challenges that companies are going through, whether it's economic challenges, motivational challenges. And I just think there's so many resources. There probably was a time in the early years of GDA that to hear an expert voice, you had to hire a speaker to travel and come get on the stage in front of you. But now, you can go to watch TED Talks all day long. There are so many wonderful podcasts. And I think on any topic out there, that you're struggling with, there's a voice of reason. For me, my go-to gal, and I sometimes feel like we're twins separated at birth, is Brene Brown.
Wow.
I love her vulnerability.
Yeah.
And I love when she admits that Brene Brown, the queen of clear communications, gets it wrong. I can hear her on a podcast and she's like, "Oh man, I blew it with my team. I know better, but I did this." I mean, she has just been a source for me that, we can all make mistakes. We can all get better. And I think I've had to be that way. I mean, I've had turnover, I've lost clients. I mean, I could sit around and tell you a story that would make you cry, but
Yeah.
I never focused on that. Or if I did, I set the timer, like, they didn't understand, it wasn't fair. Okay, 45 seconds. Okay, we're done. And I've had to focus on the positive. So I
Yeah.
guess, but I'm surrounded by that. Just this morning, we had Allison Levine in here, and she's a speaker, who summited Everest. And she just had, I mean, all during the meeting, I was just jotting things down that she was saying because we're just surrounded by positive inspiration, I guess you would say.
Yeah. Well, what I hear you saying, and I learned this from Matthew Pollard. I don't know if you know Matthew at
Yes, I
all.
do. I do.
And Matthew was a guy, and out of desperation, had to learn how to sell. And he's
Hmm.
written a great book called The Introvert's Edge, right?
Hmm.
And he was like, I studied YouTube on sales every weekend. And then I went out and practiced during the week and made money and sold stuff. And then I went home and practiced on the weekend more, you know, learning sales on YouTube, right? I mean, and I think what I hear you saying is you hit the valley, there's people that'll come alongside and support you. There's education. One of my favorite movies is Shawshank Redemption.
Oh, I love that movie.
Right? You remember when
Yes.
he goes when you remember when he goes, into solitary and
Hmm.
and he because he was playing the music, right? And he
Yeah.
flipped it on, and he goes and they go, "Oh, man, that must have been a hard 30 days." He goes, "Easiest stretch I ever did. I had Tchaikovsky, I had Bach, I had them all with me." And I was
Yeah.
like, "Oh, man,"
Uh,
because when you get the knowledge, right? Like, they're all with you. And I think that was also Think and Grow Rich. He's like, he would do the whole playwright where he would go in a room and act like this is what Lincoln would say in this situation. This is
yeah.
what this guy would say. This is what she would say in this situation. And because he'd studied them so much that he knew their reactions, right?
Yeah.
And it was like, whoa, like that's a whole new level. But like once you get that education, nobody can take it away.
That's right. And I like how you said, he took them with him. And I think, our common membership in EO is really a huge thing that's helped me through the valleys, especially when you're in a forum environment and you realize, you know, you a lot of people have been where you've been.
Yeah.
And I think getting support from peers is really important. So I love EO and I love my industry conference, the
Yeah.
International Association of Speakers Bureaus. So
Yeah. Do
that's been
you
really
do you rep
important.
do you represent Brene?
So Brene is managed by an office called the Speaker's Office, and she works with multiple bureaus. And I've
Okay.
probably booked her, I don't know, 5 to 6 times, but I've had the pleasure of being on site, and she is the real deal.
Yeah.
And I do love her books, The Art of
Yeah.
Imperfection, Dare to Lead. I
Oh,
literally feel like when I'm reading them that she knows me, and I love her podcast, and I think that Unlocking Us podcast was something that really helped me get through the pandemic because she was like, "This is a first time none of us know what we're doing," and she made it so real.
yeah. No, and I think that's so good. And by the way, Dare to Lead, like, come on, like maybe one of the best books. I recommend that book probably like 5 times a year, right? And it's so good because it's our world, right? It's the world of calculated risk of entrepreneurship, and it takes a lot of courage. And the other thing I like is, my former company was the Courage Academy, right?
I forgot
And
that, yeah.
yeah, yeah, and that group, I mean, she always talks about the courage, and man, it's not the absence of fear, that's for sure, because we all got that. So
Yeah,
I
that's
really
right.
appreciate her for sure. So good. Gail, tell people where they can find you if you want to be found.
G Well, heck yeah. So gdaspeakers.com, and on our homepage is a link to all of our social channels. We're on LinkedIn, we're on Instagram, we're on Facebook. And, I think it's a fun, positive thing to follow. I try to write a blog every month about trends I see in the industry and feature, current speakers that are excelling, and I think it's positive whether you're
Yeah.
hiring a speaker or not.
Are your clients corporate associations, individuals? Who are your main clients, Gail?
I come from the corporate world, so initially there were a lot of people from IT type companies because of my relationships at EDS. So we do a lot in the large corporate space, which I think is one of my superpowers. Having a long-term career in corporations, I know how to navigate, purchase orders and procurement departments and red tape and legal terms and all that's second nature to me. We also do work with associations and we work with a lot of membership driven organizations. Nando Parado was a former YPO member. So
Yeah,
initially I got deep into YPO because he was like a legend there. And then as I got into EO, I kind of stayed away from it because I wanted that to be my space to go and I didn't want people to think that I was soliciting. But over the recent years, especially since I've served as learning chair for Dallas, there have been EO chapters that have reached out to us and asked for help, but I don't forwardly push that, but love helping YPO members and EO members put together a learning year. I think that's a lot of fun.
yeah, that's cool.
And that's pretty much, yeah, not really individuals per se,
Yeah.
because most people own something. They're either a membership, association, or a corporation that's holding an event
Y
and they
You're
need some.
doing typically, your speakers are speaking to multi hundreds at an event. This isn't a retreat of 8,
No,
typically, not
don't.
workshops, things like that. So that's your group. That is incredible. Gail Davis, so excited to have you on board today at the Winners Find a Way show. We are every Friday, 12:30 p.m. Eastern and 9:30 a.m. Pacific on LinkedIn Live, Facebook Live, and Leadership the YouTube channel. You can find us there and always check our weekly live show. And then you can find us on all the major podcast networks. Gail, thank you again for joining us on the Winner Find a Way show. I always am thrilled to have a fellow EOer and
Yes.
talking shop and talking industry. Like, so good to learn more about GDA and everything you're up to, and excited about the lessons today. A lot of them, and a lot of great names that we talked about, like really cool stuff.
Well, I thoroughly enjoyed it. I've loved the fact that I've had a sneak peek on your book that I know is coming out later this summer. And I'm excited to hear more about that. And I may have to, reinitiate our earlier conversation when you get
Yeah,
this best selling book out there, Mr.
yeah.
Trent.
I'm ready. I'm ready for it. You've
All right.
arrived when you're a GDA speaker. I'll just say that on air. All right. That's when you've arrived, when you're a GDA speaker.
That's
So for
awesome.
everybody else, thank you for joining us, and winners find a way.